Welcome to Meta with your host, Dr. Elhanan Gazit, your ultimate destination for leaders and creators. Here, we share some of the best metaverse, gaming, and digital innovation news, stories, and insights. Think fast, level up smart. Game on.
Okay, so welcome to the deep dive, where we cut through all the noise and get right to the essential insights that are really shaping our world.
Yeah, we're not about just chasing the headlines. Right?
Exactly. It's more about understanding the deeper trends.
The underlying currents.
And we do that by, diving into very specific sources, very carefully chosen sources.
Yeah, curated sources that can give us a unique angle.
And today we're going to be focusing on something that's really at the intersection of global gaming
and Middle Eastern strategy.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is. It's particularly Saudi Arabia and kind of their unexpected move into the Pokémon GO universe.
Right.
But also kind of stepping back and looking at the broader picture of the just booming gaming sector in that whole region.
Yeah, so we've got two really interesting sources that we're going to be using to guide this conversation.
Yeah.
One is from Many 2050.
Yeah, Many 2050 lays out a really compelling overview, I think, of the gaming landscape in the Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, and it's not just about, the economics of it, but really its cultural significance as well.
Exactly. And then to kind of complement that, we have a fantastic analysis by Dr. Elhanan Gazit.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
Who really delves into this recent acquisition that Saudi Arabia has made.
Yeah.
And what it might signal.
Yeah, and to get even deeper into the strategic thinking behind that and what we can learn from this.
The actionable takeaways.
Yes, exactly. We're introducing a new segment today.
Oh, nice.
Called Level Up Move of the Week.
I love it.
And it's really going to be guided by Dr. Gazit's expertise.
He's perfect for this.
So for our listeners who may not be familiar, Dr. Gazit, he specializes in what he calls Gameful Intelligence.
Which is a fascinating concept.
It is. So essentially, he's looking at how those principles of strategic thinking and data analysis that we see in gaming, how that can be applied to business growth, to personal success, especially in this age of AI.
Yeah, it's not just about playing games, right? It's about extracting these principles and applying them to real life.
Exactly. Think of this segment as we're taking real-world events. We're looking at it through that strategic lens.
Yeah, kind of like a game board, right?
Yes.
What are the moves? What are the strategies? What can we learn from them?
Exactly. So let's just jump right in to our very first Level Up Move of the Week.
Okay, excited.
I think a lot of people probably saw this headline. Saudi Arabia made an acquisition related to Niantic's gaming division.
Niantic, of course, is the company behind Pokémon GO.
Yeah, the global phenomenon of Pokémon GO. And they spent a lot of money.
Yeah, a staggering $3.5 billion.
Which I'm guessing, when people saw that headline, the first reaction was probably, wait a minute.
Wow.
Saudi Arabia.
The oil kingdom.
Investing in a mobile game.
Seems a little counterintuitive.
Very much so.
Right, and that's really where Dr. Gazit's perspective, I think, is so valuable.
Yeah, he really reframes this whole acquisition.
Yeah, his argument is that they weren't really buying a game so much as they were acquiring these big data reservoirs.
Yeah.
Right, we're talking about access to behavioral data of tens of millions of players worldwide.
That's huge.
Yeah, think about it. They now have insights into people's real-world movement patterns.
Yeah.
Their engagement habits, their location preferences.
So it's almost like a massive intelligence network.
Built around a game.
That is a really interesting way to look at it. So it's not about catching these little digital creatures. It's about capturing real-world human behavior.
At a massive scale.
Yeah, and for someone, in the executive suite, for an investor, someone making big decisions, what's the strategic significance of this kind of data?
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
When you said big decisions, because increasingly, we're seeing that control over information translates to power to influence in business and geopolitics.
Makes sense.
This kind of data, this granular data on user behavior, it allows for incredibly targeted advertising. It gives insights into things like urban mobility and infrastructure needs.
So you can kind of start to predict where people are going to be.
Absolutely. And even predict economic and social trends.
What?
And so Dr. Gazit's argument is that this move, it allows Saudi Arabia to not just understand, but potentially influence real-world behavior at scale.
So it goes way beyond just simple entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. This is about strategic advantage in a data-driven world.
Okay, so let's break down why Dr. Gazit sees this as such a genius move.
Yeah.
He has 3 main points. The first one is this link between information control and money and power.
Right.
So how does a game like Pokémon GO, where people are walking around with their phones, how does that translate into that kind of leverage?
I think the key here is the augmented reality nature of the game.
Ah.
Pokémon GO.
Yeah.
It requires players to actually move around in the real world
Right.
and interact with specific locations.
Mm.
And so by its very design, it's mapping users' real-world movements.
And their interactions.
Exactly. And that data is incredibly valuable.
For a lot of reasons, I imagine.
So think about it from a business perspective first.
Okay.
This data shows where people are going, how long they're staying in certain places, what points of interest they're engaging with.
So it's like gold for targeted advertising.
Exactly. You know exactly where and when to reach specific demographics with personalized offers.
So it's like they're handing you a map of exactly what people want.
In a way, yes.
That's powerful.
But it goes even beyond that.
Okay, how so?
This data can be used to inform smart city planning,
Ah, interesting.
right? Optimize traffic flow, predict consumer spending patterns with incredible accuracy.
So it's almost like you can start to fine-tune a city
To a certain extent, yeah.
based on real-time data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about the possibilities for things like tourism campaigns, infrastructure development, all guided by real-world behavior.
So we're seeing like this massive shift in thinking using a game to gather intelligence that can inform national-level decisions.
It's a really fascinating development.
Then the second point that Dr. Gazit makes is how this acquisition strengthens Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030.
Yeah.
Now, for our listeners who are, tracking global economic trends, what is Vision 2030?
Right. So Vision 2030 is essentially Saudi Arabia's long-term strategic plan to diversify their economy away from oil
Right.
and transform the kingdom into a global hub for technology and innovation.
So they're really trying to, modernize their image in a way.
Absolutely. And they're making massive investments in the digital economy, which, as the Niantic 2050 report highlights, includes gaming and esports.
Oh, wow.
And so Dr. Gazit sees this $3.5 billion acquisition as a key part of that strategy.
It's like a down payment on the future.
Exactly. It's about building that technological infrastructure, gaining control over consumer trends, and establishing themselves as a major player.
And on the world stage.
Globally, yeah.
So it's not just about diversifying, their entertainment portfolio.
Yeah.
It's about positioning themselves for the future.
For the future of technology for data-driven commerce.
This is huge.
Yeah, it's a really bold move.
Okay. And the third point that Dr. Gazit makes, I find this really fascinating, the analogy of Minecraft on a national scale.
Yes.
What does he mean by that?
So this is where I think that long-term vision becomes really clear. So he draws a parallel to Microsoft's acquisition of Minecraft.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, initially, a lot of people thought that Microsoft had overpaid for it.
Right.
But today, Minecraft is being used as a really powerful tool to train AI,
Interesting.
especially in areas like spatial reasoning and problem solving.
Wow. So they're using this game to teach AI how to think.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Gazit's argument is that Saudi Arabia is making a similar bet with this acquisition.
They're getting in on the ground floor.
Exactly. They're acquiring this massive data set of real-world human movement and interaction
So they're going to have all this data to teach AI.
about how people behave in different contexts.
Yeah.
And that has implications for everything from urban planning to economic forecasting to even national security
It's like they're building a national level intelligence base.
using a game.
Yeah, to inform AI development.
And ultimately strategic decision-making.
This is fascinating. So to kind of zoom out a little bit and give a broader context to this level up move, let's look at the overall gaming landscape in the Middle East and North Africa.
Right.
And we're going to be drawing from that Niantic 2050 report. What are some key trends or statistics that our listeners should be aware of?
So the Niantic 2050 report really paints a picture of a dynamic and rapidly expanding market.
Okay.
They project that the gaming sector in the region is going to reach almost $3 billion by 2028.
That's a lot of growth.
It's already valued at $4 billion in 2023.
Wow.
And mobile gaming really dominates there.
Makes sense.
It accounts for about 80% of the market.
And what's driving this growth?
So a couple of key factors, the demographics.
Okay.
You've got a young, digitally native population.
Right.
Over 60% are under the age of 30.
Wow.
And you've got high smartphone penetration rates in countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt.
So it's all kind of coming together at the right time.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got this real push from governments.
Okay.
For example, the Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 and their public investment fund are really driving a lot of this growth.
So there's a lot of support for this.
Yeah, a lot of investment.
So how does this context then inform our understanding of Saudi Arabia's move?
So it's really important, I think, to see this acquisition not as an isolated incident, but as part of a larger trend.
Okay.
It's a calculated move within a region that's embracing digital entertainment and seeing its economic potential.
Right. So they're kind of like riding this wave.
Exactly. And with those high engagement rates and the focus on technological advancement.
You know, it makes sense that they would want to use this gaming data for their own strategic goals.
Right. They're really positioning themselves at the forefront of this digital economy in the region and possibly beyond.
It's very forward-thinking.
It is.
Now, you know, we always want to consider all sides of the story. So Dr. Gazit also brings up some really important potential dangers and risks associated with this deal.
Right.
What are some of the key concerns that he articulates?
Yeah, he highlights a few things that I think are really worth paying attention to. So, firstly, the control over sensitive geographical information.
Right, because this game is collecting all that location data.
Yeah.
Exactly, and on a global scale. So this could potentially provide insights into critical infrastructure, military installations, strategic areas.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling.
It is. And then
Right.
secondly, he points to the potential for political influence and manipulation
Oh, so.
through highly personalized messaging based on all this behavioral data that they now have access to.
Oh, wow.
So imagine, you know, very targeted campaigns designed to sway public opinion or influence voting behavior.
That's scary.
It's a real possibility. And then thirdly, there's the risk that this data could be shared with or sold to third parties.
Oh, wow. So it's not just Saudi Arabia that could be using this.
Right. It could be used in economic competition, geopolitical struggle.
That's like a new kind of weapon.
In a way, yeah.
And then finally, he also raises concerns about potential security threats,
Right.
like direct threats.
From the intelligence that could be gathered about sensitive locations through those user movement patterns.
So it's like people are unknowingly mapping out sensitive areas.
And that data could be used for malicious purposes. This is a lot to think about.
It is.
And Dr. Gazit specifically addresses the implications of this for other nations, including Israel.
Yeah, he points out that this ability to track the movement patterns of a large population within a country like Israel could provide a significant intelligence advantage.
Especially, you know, in times of conflict.
Exactly. And he actually brings up an interesting historical example.
Oh, what's that?
He talks about the Pokémon GO mania in Israel back in 2016,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
where the military actually banned the game on its basis.
Because of these security concerns.
Yeah, exactly. They were worried about soldiers, you know, unknowingly revealing sensitive information.
And that really highlights the, you know, the sensitivity of this location-based data.
In a region with a lot of geopolitical complexities.
Yeah, absolutely. So given these potential risks, what are some immediate actions that Dr. Gazit recommends?
Yeah, so he has some very practical advice, I think, for individuals, parents, and even for governments and law enforcement.
Okay, let's start with individuals. What can people do?
So his advice is pretty straightforward.
Okay, good.
Disable location permissions within the Pokémon GO app.
Okay.
Limit personalized advertising. That way you're reducing the amount of data that's being tracked.
Right, less data, less problems.
Exactly. And then just make it a habit to delete your location history on your devices regularly.
Okay, so like once a month.
At least, yeah.
Okay, and what about for parents?
So for parents, he recommends blocking location access for their children who are playing the game.
Okay.
Setting limits on playtime.
To minimize the data exposure.
Right, and then monitoring any in-app purchases very closely.
That's a good point. You know, kids can really rack up those charges.
Oh, yeah, and then really importantly, educating their children about the potential risks of data collection in online games.
So just having those conversations.
Yeah, raising awareness.
Okay, and then finally, what about governments and law enforcement?
So he urges them to investigate where user data is being stored and processed.
To make sure it's not gonna, you know, the wrong hands.
Right, especially if it's being transferred to servers under Saudi control.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be a big concern.
And he also suggests considering blocking the game in strategically sensitive areas.
So around military bases, things like that.
Exactly. And then demanding full transparency from Niantic and Saudi Arabia.
About their data usage policies?
Right, and insisting that they adhere to strong Western privacy standards.
So kind of like putting some safeguards in place.
Essentially.
So it's a multi-layered approach
Yeah.
to, you know, risk awareness and mitigation.
Exactly.
Dr. Gazit also places this acquisition within a broader global context.
Yeah.
And he compares it to strategies of other major players.
He draws an interesting parallel with China.
Oh, okay.
Because they have a huge presence in the global gaming market.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah, Tencent, the Chinese tech giant, holds a major stake in a lot of gaming companies.
Wow.
And they also use gaming data for advertising and for training their AI models.
So it's a similar kind of strategy.
Very similar. And he suggests that Saudi Arabia's move might be a reflection of a similar ambition.
To kind of harness that power of gaming for both economic and maybe security-related objectives.
Ah, that's interesting. And he even mentions the U.S. Army's America's Army game.
Right.
As an example of how gaming can be used for recruitment and potentially data gathering.
Exactly.
So it seems like everyone's kind of getting in on this.
Yeah, it's a global trend.
And given all these examples, Dr. Gazit actually anticipates that we might see more regulations.
From the U.S. and the EU.
Regarding, data transfer and control.
Especially with these kinds of acquisitions.
So kind of similar to what's happening with TikTok right now.
Exactly.
So the world's kind of waking up to this issue.
Yeah, the strategic importance of gaming and the data that it generates.
So Dr. Gazit, what's his main takeaway for our listeners, especially those in leadership positions?
His core message is that we're in this rapidly evolving age of AI.
Right.
And operating with what he calls gameful intelligence is becoming absolutely crucial.
And what does that mean exactly, gameful intelligence?
It's about understanding the strategic implications of data, anticipating future moves, thinking several steps ahead.
Like in a game of chess.
Exactly. And this acquisition is a perfect case study.
Yeah, it really highlights how important data control is.
Especially in a world that's increasingly driven by digital interactions.
And for our listeners, in the executive suite for investors.
It really shows the hidden value within these technologies that we might think are just for entertainment.
Yeah, a mobile game. Who would have thought?
Right. So it's about having that strategic, data-driven mindset.
So this has been a really insightful depth dive. I feel like we've learned so much.
It's been fascinating.
So to recap Saudi Arabia's move into the Pokémon GO ecosystem,
yeah,
it's not just about entertainment.
It's about data.
It's about potentially influencing economic trends.
Technological advancement.
And national security.
It's a really significant move.
And it aligns perfectly with that broader gaming landscape and those digital ambitions that we're seeing in the Middle East.
As that Mini 2050 report shows.
Exactly. And this brings us to our Level Up Move of the Week takeaway for you.
Yes.
Recognize that strategic value of data.
Even data from something like a mobile game.
Exactly. Understand that user behavior provides intelligence.
It's a goldmine of insights.
Protect your data.
And evaluate the motivations behind the technologies that you're using.
Absolutely. And if you found Dr. Gazit's insights on gameful intelligence as valuable as we have,
we highly recommend checking out his podcast.
Yeah, he goes into a lot more detail there.
And if you have any questions about his upcoming book,
tentatively titled Gameful Intelligence:
The Secrets of Business Growth and Personal Happiness in the Gen AI Era,
please feel free to DM us, and we'll be sure to pass your inquiries along.
And for our listeners, just a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
What other seemingly harmless trends or technologies might be hiding those layers of strategic value that we haven't fully grasped yet?
Oh, that's a good question.
The world is increasingly shaped by data.
Right? Great point. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Think fast, level up smart. Game on.